Hey everybody, what is going on? We are back once again with the Square Roundtable. My name is Juan. I am joined alongside Mr. Ryan and Keith, the combination of the two gentlemen that consist together, the three of us, of Byte That. And now in this video, this is where I do not know what to expect because we actually have a devil's advocate here for once. But we're talking about why do we choose wrestling over traditional sports? We're talking basketball, baseball, football, all that good stuff. Mr. Ryan McNulty will probably be more of the devil's advocate as my friend, you do watch sports, don't you?
Well, I pretty much only watch NFL, so that's... But
that
it is, you know,
though.
It is a sport that I'm
one
very
more
much
than I.
into. Yes.
Yes, and my friend Keith Poshik, do you consume that which is sports?
Not really. On a very, I'll watch the big ones, like the Super Bowls and the Stanley Cups, and if you're Canadian, the Grey Cups, but other than that, I don't really invest myself in it too much. Now, wrestling, on the other hand.
Yeah. And then in my case, I pretty much just consume wrestling and then other forms of professional wrestling. So, taking it to you, Ryan, since you got both, why is it that us three and yourself mainly consume more wrestling than a traditional sport?
Well, wrestling, they don't really have to put in fake excitement because the product itself is exciting, and because it's obviously predetermined and they make storylines and all of that, it's always entertaining. Whereas sports, sometimes there's just a really boring game, and sometimes they really try and force these storylines. They're like, oh, this guy's facing his old team, and what's gonna happen here? And another thing is interviews. Interviews and characters are very interesting. Whereas if you watch a lot of sports interviews, they say nothing. They say,
to be fair, when the sports interviews are good, they're real good.
Yes, every once in a while you'll come across a great one like Richard Sherman after the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago. Exactly, you'll get those, but that's so rare because most of the time, in sports interviews, they'll say 1,000 words that mean absolutely nothing. But wrestling is built to entertain, so you're pretty much always going to come away liking something.
And to continue Ryan's point, that's why I like wrestling. I like it for the entertainment factor. When I'm talking about wrestling with people, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to go watch Monday Night Raw, I usually jokingly say, I'm going to go watch my stories. The same way that an old lady would talk about The Young and the Restless or The Days of Our Lives. Because that's kind of what I consider wrestling to be. It's just a soap opera where people get hurt real bad in it. The entertainment value, of sports entertainment, I watch it for the entertainment side of things.
No, definitely. That's why I actually tried to get into sports a lot. I tried to watch UFC, NBA, but it was... First of all, there's way too many games going on at the same time with NBA and all those things. It's ridiculous. I thought it was, TNT has this one thing. Wait, there's 100 games going on? No, that's not for me. I mean, the season pass, what is that? No, I'll stick with the $9.99. With UFC, I tried watching, but yeah, if the fights aren't good, they're just dull. I mean, case in point, we talked about it before. Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. This fight that was built, the future, this built up, and then it was a legitimately good boxing match, and there were things, and then people were pissed off, especially those that betting, the money, all about the money. So we like the entertainment side of it. When you watch wrestling, how important is the athleticism for you? Of course, we're comparing everything to sports, not just wrestling and TV shows. We've talked about that before, but when it comes to the athleticism, for you, Keith, first, how much of a focus or how aware are you of that when you consume it?
I think it's important, but it's an important complement to the storylines. As far as athleticism and matches and entertainment value goes, I value entertainment value above it. But I do think both are important because at the end of the day, it is sports entertainment. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, exactly. You have the athleticism can be cool, but at the end of the day, there can be fantastic matches that are very basic. It's more about the storytelling.
But to be fair, some of the best matches, when we talk about some of our favorite matches of all time, they're all matches that tell a story themselves, right? So back to the whole complimenting thing.
And you can complement that with these amazing spots, these
Totally.
high spots that show up and these, you're just super impressed by the athleticism.
Totally.
And on Chris Jericho's podcast, he talks about this where it's what you don't do in wrestling that sort of matters as opposed to like all the moves that you do. So I guess sports is completely the contrary, which is like or I mean, am I wrong in this, Ryan? Like playing devil's advocate in sports, do you always need to see something, or is it like I mean, it doesn't matter what happens in the beginning. It's about the conclusion, who wins, or how is that different from wrestling?
Well, yeah, so the positives of sports, what sports has over wrestling, I think, is it's completely unpredictable. Wrestling, there's a lot of times you watch it long enough, you figure out who more or less is going to win. So that's one element. You go into a lot of games, even if a team is heavily favored, you still are nervous, that, oh, maybe your team's going to lose an important game or something like that. The storytelling in a game actually can matter. Case in point, as a Patriots fan, I'm going to go over, two games that happened in the playoffs last year. And I'm going to leave the whole Deflategate thing out of it. So let's just not talk about that. That's a whole separate storyline if you want to go there. But basically, they had a game against the Ravens that was just a completely like heart attack type of game, where it's like, oh, they're going to lose, they're going to win. And it was, super exciting. And when they won at the end, the Patriots, it was just awesome. Like you felt like great because, there was so many twists and turns. Whereas the following game, the AFC Championship game, the infamous Deflategate game, they blew them out. And it just wasn't even that exciting because the Colts just never had a chance. So what happens during the game can kind of affect the outcome. Sure, you're happy that they won, but you're just like, yeah, well, I knew like a half an hour into the game that they were basically going to win, so it wasn't that exciting. So that's kind of the downside there.
So I guess my next question is specifically WWE, because wrestling can be a whole lot of companies. WWE compared to NBA or NFL, another company specifically. What tires you out in terms of benefit? What tires you guys out the most? And I mean, once again, I guess Ryan is the expert in this SRT, but yeah, what is that feeling of when you consume like Raw every Monday night? I know football has an off season, so what's your take on that combination?
Well, see, I think the off season is good because come September when the Patriots or whatever having their first game, the start of NFL season is super exciting. You've been waiting months for it. And, unlike other sports, there's only, your team only has one game a week. So it is very easy to keep up with that. But like, even playing like fantasy football, you're excited about all the other teams playing too. So that off season really builds up anticipation. Whereas wrestling is more prone to burnout because it's every single Monday night. It never stops. It's been going on for years. So it's easy to just kind of stop watching for long periods of time just because, you are way more prone to, burning out on it. So I think, obviously wrestling has the advantage of, going year round and it makes them, money that way. But as a consumer, the off season I feel like is important.
I think the biggest cause of burnout in wrestling, and it's a problem currently, is that we're seeing the same thing over and over every single week. It's not that it's almost like a lack of storyline where we're just seeing the same thing rehashed with different people involved in it. And that's really the biggest cause of burnout, at least for me. And if they did something like different every single week, then maybe yeah, but that's really easy for me to say just sitting there.
Up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it goes back to maybe there should be an off season in wrestling, but that's an entirely other SRT.
So this is where I bring up the concluding comparison. Could we say then that wrestling is more comfort food and NFL, football, all the other sports are more like a restaurant? And I mean in the way that, Ryan, you mentioned it. You've taken breaks from wrestling. You come back and it's you sort of know what's going on. You don't even need to read a lot to just get an idea, as opposed to football or, NBA. Like when I started watching, I was lost because I'm like, I know these teams, but the guys and then who changed, it's a lot. So is that why we choose wrestling over sports?
Well, wrestling, I think both both wrestling and any sport, it's there's a big barrier to entry. Like, it takes a while. Like, even, you know, when I started watching wrestling again in like 2012, it took me a few weeks to kind of adjust, figure out, you know, what was going on. I had the advantage of watching previously, so I knew most of the guys, but learning about some of the newer guys, figuring out all the storylines that were going on at the time. For a new person coming into wrestling, they got to learn a lot of names. You know, they got to figure out who the commentators are, the ring announcers. You slowly learn all that. But in the same with sports, sure, there's a ton more players, you know, as opposed to there are wrestlers.
Do you think it's easier in wrestling, though, just because it's an individual sport entertainment?
Well, the thing is, I think in some ways sports is easier if you're sticking to one team. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't know all the players on the team that they watch. You just kind of know who the stars are, and you don't really have to worry about the other teams if you're just following one. So sports might be a little bit easier.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sort of wrapping my head around this, and it kind of makes sense because I guess like right now, Kevin Owens or guys from NXT, you know, people that are being called up, that those that consume a lot of wrestling are just going to be, yeah, it's the guy that we knew was going to come up. But then for other people, it's, oh, it's the fat guy. Oh, it's the skinny, tall guy. You know, and it's hard to put that brand when we're in sports. You know, do you play good? All right, cool.
Yeah.
But in wrestling, you know, we care about appearance, how they talk, how they come out, you know, the entrance music. So it's funny. I actually thought it was going to be the other way, but wrestling in a way that barrier of entry can be a lot harder.
Plus, like, a lot of basic rules of sports most people know, but not everyone knows all, like, the intricacies of wrestling with, like, the countouts and the, you know, rope breaks and things like that. Because in sports it
never changes. With wrestling it changes every other week.
There are rule changes, but
they're
not
very
to the
minor,
base.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to be in the in crowd to really see it.
People don't get buried in cement that often in NBA.
Like they're moving the extra point back a few yards and things like that.
But they haven't changed the length of a football field ever, right?
I can't confirm that, but not in many, many years.
To be continued.
Indeed.
But I guess at the end of the day, it's similar to what we've talked about in the podcast. The reason that at least we choose the majority of our time, not whether we choose wrestling over sports, but our time that we consume is mostly spent on wrestling, is because of the entertainment factor. We get to know these characters. It is kind of like comfort food and all that good stuff. So for everybody watching, let us know. Why do you choose wrestling over sports? Or you want to get a controversial, why do you choose sports over wrestling? Because I know there's probably a couple of people watching going, wrestling is fake. How dare you even compare that to something else? But that's the awesome thing about YouTube. So if you do like this video, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. You check out the podcast, available every single Tuesday. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
We're getting good at this.
Until next time, yeah, we're progressing. We're doing good. We don't need an off season. So until next time, thanks for watching. Check out other SRTs right here, including Fight Night. A lot of cool stuff. Thanks for watching. We will be back.